She has also served the local church in various capacities as Bible worker, Adventist Youth Society leader, health and personal ministry leaders, and in various Sabbath school roles as from the cradle role right through to the adult level. She's passionate about making Bible truths accessible to all and shares simple biblical life principles in her YouTube series, Faith Talk with Fiona. Outside the church, Fiona's portfolio of skills specialize in business and culture transformation, diversity and inclusion, change management, employee engagement, strategic communications, strategy development and business process improvement. And she is a certified change management professional, agile coach, and certified by the Neuro Leadership Institute as a brain-based result trained coach and in brain-based conversation skills. She has over 15 years experience in successfully delivering large-scale global business transformation programs for Fortune 100 corporations in the hospitality, defense, energy, oil and gas, consumer products, pharmaceutical, and transport rail industries. She holds a master's degree in human resource management from the University of Salford in Greater Manchester, England. Fiona currently serves in HR as Assistant Vice President for Organizational Development and Change Management at MedStar Health. And MedStar Health is the largest healthcare provider in the DMV area. She is an organizational leader and strategic thought partner to leaders across the MedStar Health system in building change agility, organizational capacity, and a transformational culture and mindset. Today, she will present Bouncing Back After COVID-19, how to recover, reposition, and revive your career. She will also share strategies on how to thrive in your career after the most debilitating impact of a profound life event. Please join me in welcoming Fiona to the Wellness Wheel series. Yokoso. That is welcome in Japanese. I hope I got it right. No, in Korean.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mary, for your warm welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am indeed privileged to be here with you. I'm so grateful to Elizabeth and the Women's Ministry team for welcoming me in with such warm arms. Sister Elizabeth is the reason really why I'm a member at Sligo. I was visiting one Sabbath and she saw me and met me and found something for me to do. And so I just want to say thank you again for allowing me this privilege. So we are here this afternoon to talk about vocational wellness, and I'm going to start to share my screen here. And really, as we think about our vocational wellness, it's not just our career, it's our calling. And I had intended to really kind of focus on our career, but I'm going to be a little bit wider today. So our title, as Mary has so kindly shared, is Bouncing Back After COVID-19, How to Recover, Reposition and Revive Your Life to Achieve Wholeness. That's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. And I thought in terms of teeing up our conversation today, it would make sense for me just to share just a little bit about myself. I know Mary has given me such a kind and eloquent introduction, but I thought it'd be helpful just to share a little bit about my background and tell you why I believe that I am, as it were, suited. I have credibility to share, on this topic. And so I wanted to share how this wide-eyed 14-year-old, the journey between her, being this wide-eyed 14-year-old to becoming the woman on the right. So I'm going to take a slight pause and share a bit of a semi-biographical journey to set some context and share some lessons learned and how I think they're relevant to achieving wholeness as we all come out of this pandemic. So this slide is quite busy, and as you can probably tell, I have been blessed to live a full and varied life. LOL. Mary's introduction was very kind, but a bit of background for me. At the age of 5, I emigrated from the UK. So you'll see the Union Jack there. It's big, it's bold, it kind of covers everything else, because at my root, I identify as Black British with deep roots in Jamaica. And at the age of 5, I emigrated with my mother to live in the land of my ancestral roots, in the sunny Isle of Jamaica. I immediately took to the culture, to the food, to the language, like a duck to water. And that's no surprise, because at the age of 5, our neural pathways in our brain are still forming. And generally, that's why children find it easier to be adaptable, to learn new languages, to adopt new cultures, etc. And so this brain's ability to adapt and learn is based on something we call neuroplasticity. Well, after 10 years living in Jamaica, I returned to the UK, but my experience was the extreme opposite. I literally bawled my, well, not literally, but I bawled my eyes out when I had to return to the UK, because I perceived it to be an abrupt and unwelcome upheaval to my life. My neural pathways were more fully formed, and I resisted strongly, especially because I didn't have a choice in the move. I would have to leave my church friends, my high school friends. I wouldn't be able to graduate my class with my classmates from high school. I'd leave behind my, my family, my extended family. I had grown very attached to my maternal grandfather, and I would have to leave him behind. And I'd miss all the fruits. Oh, I mean, if you've never experienced or eaten tropical fruits, you're missing out on one of the greater joys of life. So I was going to miss out on mangoes.
Fiona?
And yes,
Fiona, I just want to pause. I want to make sure you're getting the screen. Everyone is experiencing your full screen. Naomi, can you guide us?
Most definitely. Thank you. You may want to stop, share, and share again. I believe we are able to see your speaker notes for now.
Okay. Let me do that again. So hold on. Thank you for that.
No problem.
It's the joys of technology. Okay, so I'm going to. All righty. Okay, what can you see now?
There we go. That's
Can you
perfect.
see my slide? Okay, but I have a little trick up my sleeve.
Mangoes.
I have a little trick up my sleeve. So bear with me. Okay. Can you still see all of my slides? Just my slides?
Yes,
That's
yes.
just what we need to
Wonderful. Okay. All right. So, we're adaptable. Like, I was just talking about adaptability. So we flex in the moment. So as I was saying, yeah, I was going to miss out on all these wonderful fruits. I was going to miss out on mangoes and sweet sops and naseberries. And if you've never tasted any of those, you are missing out. I was going to miss out on just feeling the sunshine on my skin and just living in what I didn't know then to be an extreme blessing, living in a majority Black country, with a level of expectation of excellence. So I grew up and I was transported to this other country, and it was a very challenging time for me. And I dare say that as I was trying to resolve myself, when I landed in England, it was a dark and dismal, gloomy day. And for weeks, if not months afterwards, I would have very vivid dreams where I literally could see and smell and feel the sensation of being back in Jamaica. Of course, I wasn't, because I would awaken in the morning and I was firmly, in England, greeted by the gray, cloudy skies. What my brain was doing then was trying to rationalize and trying to come to terms with my current reality. As I went through that, what I realized is that I had been through a level of shock, or I was going through stress, and my brain was trying to rehabilitate and trying to allow me to adjust. The shifting point for me came when I was able to realize and to accept that this was my new reality, and I was able to make a choice. And this is very important because Viktor Frankl says, one of his quotes is, "Everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So for me, this was the pivotal moment, was realizing that this was my current reality and I could choose to still cling to the past, or I could be open to the new experience that lay before me. And this ability to choose, as we know, is a God-given ability, but that is what really allowed me to pivot in my experience. As I shared in my previous slide, you will see that, I've lived a life defined by change. You'll see that I've lived in several countries. At an early age, I was impressed by God that I should be a missionary, and so I was blessed to go to Asia and work there. And what came out of my experience, being torn from my childhood home, so to speak, was a capability that I have learned to lean on. It allowed me to build resilience. It allowed me to develop a capacity for change and for adaptability and new things. And so coming out of that, I now have a love to travel. I have built a career on adapting to change, and I'm able to plumb the depths of my personal experience from what could have been seen as a very negative experience in my early childhood. It's allowed me a reservoir of experience to pull from that allows me to really meet people where they're at, understand why and how they're going through change. And so I've been, blessed to work at many companies and lead transformational change. But more importantly, it's allowed me to develop a mindset that's helped me to traverse the variances or the vagaries of life. So with that backdrop, and as we talk about the power of choice, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, because the power of choice that God has given us is very important to allow us as we traverse through uncertainty and challenges. So as we pivot now to look at COVID-19, or more so 2020, and as we stare down the crisis, hindsight is 2020. I don't think any one of us could have predicted that 2020 would turn out to be the pivotal year that it was. Like many of you, I started out with resolutions and plans and goals, and very quickly into the new year, I realized that I was going to have to put those on hold. So I did a little bit of digging, and here is a snapshot of what 2020 in rear view mirror looked like. On the left, you'll see some trends, high-level trends from Google that were trending all throughout 2020. And I think it's fair to say that 2020 was an annus horribilis, as Queen Elizabeth once said. Top trends were death, TikTok, the Google Classroom, Zoom, unemployment, masks, and Tesla stock. Who would have thought? And just here you'll see here, round about here, the blue, red, and yellow trend lines. That is focusing on Google Classroom, Zoom, and unemployment. So those kind of trended similarly. But the yellow trend line here is unemployment. And I think it's fair to say that many of us were impacted. Our employment was impacted by COVID. Aside from unemployment, we came face to face with death, on a scale, I should say, than we would have liked to. Many of us have been impacted by COVID-related deaths. If we haven't known anyone personally, we probably know someone who knew someone. I work in healthcare, and although I'm not on the front line, it's my job to support our people. And so we've been really impacted. Our frontline workers have had to deal with changing protocol quickly. They've had to deal with the personal sense of threat because of this unknown virus back, last year, and how will it impact them personally? And they soldiered on in the face of that threat and gave care to our patients. But the other traumatic thing for them was, while many patients could not be seen by their family members, these frontline workers, ended up being substitute family members. And so they were, standing in the place of family members sometimes when they were, on their, last phases of life. So, COVID has impacted us, I think, very, very harshly. And, as I think about the year, I think it's fair to say that we're all glad to see the back of it. But funnily enough, there's other things that we'll remember 2024, right? You're on mute is probably the catchphrase from last year. And for those of us who've been remote working, the little cartoon in the middle, I think, is more than just a cartoon and something to laugh about. It's real. So our whole approach to work has changed. We're remote working more. Our wardrobes that were filled with work clothes, are not as utilized as they used to be. Many people show up with just a top on, whatever, and they're wearing sweat bottoms on beneath. And so our little doggy friend here is telling the truth. We've now entered into this virtual reality, and it's strange. So what I wanted to do right now was just to take a quick poll in the chat box. If you would humor me, I wanted to find out from you, our attendees today, our guests today, how has COVID impacted or affected your career and employment, and specifically your vocation, your employment? Now, I'm going to give you very clear instructions, specific instructions. What I'd like you to do is go into the chat box, and the chat box is at the bottom of your screen. If you're on your mobile phone, I can't remember exactly how you get to it. It might be in the 3 dots. But when you go into the chat box, before you press send, don't press send yet, I want you to consider the question and think about which letter resonates with you. So I'm going to then count to 3. And once you've put the letter in the chat box, when I count to 3, I'm going to say send, and we'll all press send together. This is what's called a chat storm. It's a way of doing a poll in the chat box. So is everyone clear? I'm going to open up the chat box and see, and hopefully no one has put any answers in there yet. Okay. So how has COVID-19 affected your career and employment? You can just type the letter in. Everyone type the letter in, and then when I count to 3, we're going to press send. Okay, someone's ahead of us. Don't press send, just put the letter in. And then I'm going to count to 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Everyone press send. Let's see. We've got quite a few A's, This is I saw 1 C. Any more for any more? Wonderful. We have 1 C, mostly A's, a couple of C's. No one had reduced hours. Okay, well, thank you for taking part with me on that poll. Now, isn't that a blessing, though, that, we can say, at least in this group of individuals who are participating, that we have still had a job. That is something to give praise about. But as we think about coming on the other side of 2020, we're now into 2021, it's interesting to note that actually there are some changes in career. There are some opportunities, let's say. And so, let me just, so since this year, we've actually seen that we have some new jobs, and actually the job market is percolating. And these are in areas that are directly reflective of the opportunities that came out of the COVID crisis. So we have e-commerce, and we have the loan and mortgage industry. We have healthcare support, not just our frontline workers like nurses and doctors, but those people who support them. We also have, for example, workplace diversity. Because of the George Floyd situation last year, there have been a lot of jobs advertised on places like LinkedIn and Indeed for directors of diversity and inclusion. Digital marketing, there's been a lot of opportunity there, and content creators. You know, while we were sitting at home, isolating at home, a lot of us needed, to be able to buy things online, or to watch, entertainment, or to put our children through virtual class. All those scenarios created opportunity for people. And if they didn't have the skills, people who were being very mindful and who were able to pivot and choose to pivot and recognize the trends were able to capitalize on the opportunity. So you'll see here that although industries like hospitality, and in some respects, I would say even retail, were very, very severely impacted by COVID-19, what has happened is the pandemic has also opened the door to new opportunities. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, because when I told you about my story, coming from Jamaica to the UK, and from the UK to Japan and South Korea, and then back to England, I did my master's and I came to the States. My life has really been shaped by these, different opportunities or different times in my life. And there have been times when, I'll be honest, I've been stuck. And I felt like I've been at a crossroads in my life. And, that's for, another talk show, another time. But what I have learned is that sometimes when you're in a crisis, or when it seems like you are stuck, if you're able to look at the next step and look outward and look at what you do have in your hand. If you remember, God said to Moses, "What do you have in your hand?" That's a principle of using what's closest to you. When you look at the crisis, God always, I believe, provides something that's close to hand that you can leverage. And so the takeaway really from 2020 is that whilst COVID impacted many people severely, there have been some folks and businesses who have been able to pivot because they have used what was close to hand and they've leveraged that. So as we pivot then out of this, I want to talk a little bit more then about how can we recover, how can we reposition, and how can we revive. Now, it's nice to know that many people on this call hadn't lost their jobs. And I don't know if it's because you were in healthcare or in education, or if you were in spiritual support. But the truth is that whilst many people haven't lost their job, they are limping along in roles that really do not fulfill their best life and their passion and their calling. And so I want to just take us through a couple of thoughts so that we can really frame up and use this pivotal time in our lives to evaluate if we are where we want to be and if we are living the life that God wants us to live. Now, there are 3 steps to recovery as we think about how to recover from, a traumatic or a debilitating experience. I shared with you my traumatic experience. It kind of pales in significance now as I look back all those years ago. But as a 14, 15-year-old, it was very traumatic for me. And I've been through, other experiences, as I'm sure many of you had and have and are going through. Last year, I had the unfortunate, experience to have a knee injury. And I know many of you on the call were praying for me. And I know you'll be glad to see your prayers answered. But to get through that knee injury, I had to do some things. So one of the key things is rest. When you've come through trauma, when your body has been through a shock, whether that's physical or mental shock, you really need to rest. And why do I say mental shock? Because neuroscientists have now understand that the receptors in the brain that processes physical pain also process emotional pain. So, for example, if you are feeling feelings of rejection or other negative emotional feelings, they register in the same place in the brain that processes physical pain. So it's difficult for the brain to almost tell between physical versus physiological or physical pain. And rest is a way, both when you're physically going through trauma, for you to recover. The amygdala in the brain, which is that place that regulates our emotional response, produces cortisol, and that produces a fight, flight, or freeze response. So rest is very important in order to help your brain to recognize that it's not under threat and allow your responses to kind of settle down, the cortisol and the stress hormones to kind of decrease. The other reason why rest is important, not just physical rest, but spiritual rest, is because many times we take our feelings and our perceptions as reality, and we need to be still to recognize that God is not just is in control, he has always been in control and will still continue to be in control. And so when we rest, we allow ourselves the freedom and the space to really put things in perspective. The other thing that we need to do in recovery is to reflect. And I like to say, gather lessons learned. When life is pounding you on all different sides, it's kind of difficult to catch your breath sometimes. And one of the things that I like to do, and I encourage, folks who are, learning or who are going through a life change, and when your brain is spinning, is to actually journal. And journal is not just some nice, female pastime, something that's nice for young girls to do, to keep a diary. There's actually neuroscience, truth behind it. Left brain, right brain. When you engage the brain in creative activities, even like gardening or listening to music while you're writing, engaging both spheres of the brain allows the messages to kind of cross both spheres of the brain. And when you're able to do that in stillness, you're able to get what we call those aha moments or insights. And it's when you get those insights from your experiences that you get learning. And that helps to then create clarity out of the chaos and helps you to map a path forward. So be still, reflect. And then lastly, I say recount, as in count your blessings. Having an attitude of gratitude is more than just a flippant phrase. It's a biblical spiritual principle, but it's also a truth, because when you count and when you reflect on those things that you actually have that are a reality, it allows the brain to function and to operate at let's say a higher level. The brain cannot unthink of things. If I said to you, do not think of an elephant, the first thing that your brain does is think of an elephant before it unthinks of an elephant. And so our brains are meant and designed to focus on truth. And just because you might think that the world is falling apart because, things aren't going right, there are still lots of things that you can be thankful for and that still exist. So be still, reflect, and recount your blessings. Now, there's a writer that I've fallen in love with recently. I found a book of hers called Emotional Agility. Her name is Susan David. She's a professor at Harvard, and I absorb everything that I can of her over the last couple of months. And she has something called the emotional pyramid of needs. And while you're going through this period of reflection and being still, it's really important to allow yourself to acknowledge your emotions and your feelings. And why is this important? Because many times we compartmentalize our lives. We think that our job is just over here, our family life is over here, and we try and live our lives kind of split. But we have to remember that we are whole beings. And so this emotional pyramid of needs is helpful because it allows you to put a name on what you're feeling and what your needs are. And I won't go through all of this, but I think that it's very interesting to see that at the very bottom of this pyramid is gentle acceptance. Why is this important? Because when life throws you a curveball, and for example, you may have lost your job, or you may be going through a divorce, or you may have had an injury. You know, I had many opportunities to kind of beat myself up about, you know, maybe I should have seen whatever, you know, caused me to have my accident, or maybe you hit someone's car and you kind of beat yourself up and think, I wish I should have, could have. Realize that you did the best that you could in that moment, and give yourself compassion and gentle acceptance. And this allows you, again, to take your brain out of a threat state, and allows you to then be able to process properly what it is that you're dealing with. And there are some things that you cannot change. None of us could have counted for COVID. And so in accepting what you can accept and putting to one side those things that you can't, it allows you to exercise your choice and move forward. And Susan David calls this unhooking yourself from those beliefs that kind of keep you stuck in one place. Now, one of the things that she also talks about, you'll see that was number 3 on the pyramid, is getting yourself into a routine. It's difficult, I know, for many people who are upended by remote working. So not only were they having to work on Zoom, but they were having to take care of childcare, or they were having to figure out how they were going to take care of their elderly parents, and what were they going to do about taking care of the pet. It's a lot to try and figure out. Well, one of the things that helps us to, you know, get in a state where we can think clearly and figure out what our next moves are, is to simply set up those routines. The more you can set up routines, the less the brain has to figure out. This is why people like Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook and Steve Jobs from Apple, they used to wear the same item of clothing every day, whether it was all black or if it was a white t-shirt and jeans. That's so boring to someone like me, because I like to wear different colors. But for them, what they recognize is wearing the same outfit every day, having that routine, was one way that the brain didn't have to keep thinking and using up energy to figure out, what am I going to wear today? That energy, that nervous energy, that you know, thought processing could then be leveraged to be more creative and solve business problems. Now, I want to flip this and say, for example, if you're trying to lose weight, that might be one of your challenges. Many of us have been sitting at home and we've not been as active as we ought to have been, and we've put on some pounds. Routinizing your breakfast, eating the same thing every day. If you know that oatmeal is good for you, getting into a routine, it means that you don't have to think about what you're going to eat, and you're less tempted to reach for something that's not best for you. So the brain does well with routine. Now, all of this, all of what I've said so far, is only possible if you allow yourself, again, choice, if you allow yourself the opportunity of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. What do you mean by that, Fiona? What I mean by that is believing that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you and gives you strength. Philippians 4:13. Many times when we've been through challenges in life, we have maybe failed or perceived that we failed. Maybe we've lost something or lost someone. We've perceive that we failed at relationships, and we think that, you know, this is never going to work out for me. Whatever it is that you've gone through, it's very easy to allow that trauma and that loss to dictate how you approach life. And so the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset is that it opens up vistas for you in possibility. And this really is what the life of a Christian is about, I fully believe. I believe that God has created our brains to be open, optimistic. That's what living a life of faith is about, when we are able to really lay hold of God's word and believe him when he says that this thing is so. And we say, be it unto me according to your word, God. That is what having a growth mindset is. And it's the difference between being limiting and limitless. It's the difference between embracing challenges as an opportunity to grow versus shrinking back and avoiding challenges. It's the difference between thinking that every time someone gives you feedback, it's criticism and shrinking away, versus looking at it as an open door to new possibilities and feedback on how can I get better. So as we think about coming out of what could be really seen as a traumatic and terrible experience in 2020, as we pivot to look forward, we have to keep a growth mindset, because this is what will position us to move forward with hope and hopefulness. Now, as we talk about repositioning ourselves, I want to frame this up in really how many of us think about success. When you think of success, when you think of what it means to be living your best life, when you think about what it means to be fulfilling God's calling in your life, what does that look like? I would be interested to know if anyone feels transparent enough to share in the chat box. Please just put, 1 or 2 words. What does success look like for you? And I'm going to check the chat box really quickly and see what if anyone is bold enough to put their answers in. I would love to see. So when we think about success, I came across this little infographic, I should say, on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a great place for resourcing if you're looking for, new roles, etc. Many of us were taught to measure success just in almost like a dyad. It's salary and job title. And you can see how very limiting this can be, because God has created us to be, whole beings, and we are more than the sum of our vocational or our career achievements. So the reality is that success is more than just a salary and job title. I love it. I see someone saying being at peace. That is so important. I see someone else, Donna, saying being content. Do what you love and love what you do. That's a great tagline. So a better measure for success is having mental health, being at peace. Maybe the job title is still there. Maybe the salary is still there. The Bible says money answers all things, right? So we're practical. Yes, having a good salary is necessary. Achieving your own goals and sharing your blessings with others, these are great responses. But I think that COVID helped, and I hate to keep saying COVID, I'm going to say 2020. 2020 helped many of us to reevaluate how we defined success. It caused us to pause and to catch our breath, and to realize that the things we were chasing after probably weren't all that important. So having things like free time, spending more time with family, being physically healthy and liking what you actually do, those things are measures of success. So as we move forward then, I want to share with you a little tool that I use with my coaching clients. And it's called the Wheel of Life. And, as we shared before, I decided to get certified as a coach because I realized that, life has so many bumps and blips and crossroads. And I feel like I have maybe the ability to help someone. And it's one of my gifts, actually. Teaching is one of my gifts. And so when I identified that, I thought, how can I use this to be a blessing to others? And so I decided to be a coach. And so I'm, being certified. I am certified, but I'm also continuing my certification. So this tool is something that I use with my coaching clients, and it's called the Wheel of Life. And you'll see it's a 360 look at your life. And what I do with my clients is, we take this at the very beginning of our sessions. We talk about what are those areas of your life? And you'll see that there are no titles on this, just area 1, area 2. They get to choose what that area is. So some people will say area 1 is my health. Area 2 is my marriage. Maybe area 3 is my finances. Area 4 is my relationships. And so they go around this wheel, and it's so pertinent because we're talking about a wellness wheel, aren't we, today? And so when you go through this wheel, you take what we call a current state assessment, and you decide in that area, how do you feel your life is fulfilling? Sorry, that area of your life is being fulfilled. What percentage would you mark that area of your life? And so Pete, I see people, someone is marking on this. That's interesting. I don't think we're using annotated tools, but the idea is that you get to take a check of where you are in your life. So as you consider this wheel, don't put this in the chat box, please. Consider, where would you evaluate your spiritual life? And if someone has maybe a child or someone, I think if we can maybe make sure that we haven't got the annotated tools on, take a moment and just decide, where do you think you fit in this wheel? What areas of your life would you name, and what percentage would you give them? So that's something for you to think about. And then I want you to think about your values, which are your North Star. Think about what is most important for you to have right now in order for you to live your best life. These are your values, right? So for example, it might be service to others, and it might be having fun. And if anyone is bold enough, I would love to see what you think your values are in the chat box. So go ahead and put one value that you hold to in the chat box. My values, some of my values are integrity. That's important to me. Service. That's why I took maybe 6 years of my life overseas. But the truth is that service is, it could be cleaning the church. It could be teaching Sabbath school. It could be washing up the plates after Sabbath potluck. Service can manifest itself in many different ways. It can be in giving to others, sharing your blessings. Faithfulness is important to me. Loyalty. Honesty is very important, as well as having compassion. But all of that would be nothing for me without having a sense of adventure. You saw the pictures at the very beginning. I love to travel, and I love, to experience new cultures and food and language and people. I mean, it's the zest for living. And I can't understand people who, they've never traveled, but, I try to expand my mind to understand what that must be like. But I love adventure. It's one of my values. So, I think we're having a little bit of a battle with Peter Nigel and the annotation tools. So as we think about our values, I want to share another tool that is helpful. I'm loving these comments. I see compassion, integrity, loving others. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your values. So as you think about your values, this is another tool that I use. And the idea is that you write these values down, and then in the second box, you spend some time thinking about, what do these values give you and why are they important to you right now? And then you take your top 10, and then you write your top 5. And it's really important to get clear on your values, because in times of crisis, your values are your North Star. Those are the things that you choose to live out every day, regardless of what happens. These are the values that I'm going to live to. And it really helps to keep you aligned with who you are and who God says you are. So I'm going to move on now to share a little bit then about Revive. And you remember we talked about choice, the power of choice. And God has given us all the power of choice. I think it's really important to remember as you look outward that everything can be achieved and reframed if you choose to do so. So when I think about revive, I think about clarity coming out of chaos if you choose to see the clarity. For many people, they got very clear about what was important to them. I have a boss who is not much older than I am, and having gone through this period of time, helped her get very clear that she was going to decide to actually retire at 50. And so she's done that. It gives you an opportunity to see the opportunities coming out of the crisis. You think back to the slide where I shared all those roles, those new jobs coming out. Maybe this is the season where you get to do something that you have always wanted to do and dreamed about. When you have outlined your values, take some time to really list out your key skills. What am I good at? What are the things that I'm really great at doing? Then the other thing that you should do is take some time to really outline your God-given gifts and talents, because those things really make up the sum of who you are. And so when you outline your talents and your gifts, you will then be able to find out what are those skills that are transferable. Maybe you haven't lost your job, but maybe you want to pivot anyway to do something that's more fulfilling. Maybe you want to become an entrepreneur. Maybe you want to do coaching like me, or maybe maybe you want to have your own business and you want to, bake things or do vegan cookery and sell that. The sky's the limit. Which is why I say, realign with your purpose. As we think about who God has created us to be, it's very important to be centered on that. I was very clear at the age of 12 or 13 that I wanted to be a missionary, but I thought I had to become a doctor to be a missionary. And so I was very disappointed when my chemistry teacher said, you should think about another career. Well, I was so grateful when I found out that I could actually be a teacher and be a missionary. But I don't have to travel overseas. I can be a missionary right now. I can actually pivot out of COVID and I can use YouTube, or you can use social media to be the platform where you use your gifts and talents to fulfill your purpose. The next thing you should do is build a network. And the reason for that is no one is an island. You learn by leveraging the blessings and the skills of other people. We learn from other people. But not only that, I just recently found out this week, I was attending a seminar, and I recently found out that our brains, the energy or the frequencies of our brain is able to actually influence other people around us. Now, we know that words have power, and the Bible says, the gift of life and death is in the tongue, but we haven't maybe really understood physiologically how that really could be. Now, neuroscientists understand that our brains and the words that we speak have frequency to modulate other people's behavior and mood. That's so fascinating to me. So the network that you build around you and that you allow around you can really impact your thoughts, your attitudes, your behaviors, and how far you want to aspire to. And then lastly, as I said, transferable skills. Don't be limited by what you used to do and what you were trained on. Right now, everyone believes that you can fake it till you make it. But the truth is that you don't have to be perfect to move forward. You can take the little that you have, what's in your hand, and while you work on the plan of addition, God will work on the plan of multiplication. And he will really lay out a platform for you to enter into a new phase of life where you can be fulfilled. So as we wind down our time together, I want to just leave with you some closing thoughts on, what you can do to really thrive. We've talked about recovering, right? We've talked about resting and counting our blessings and reflecting. And we've talked about what we need to do to recover and we've really talked about other areas that we can really focus on in order to really revive our life. And I want to leave you with a few closing thoughts in terms of how you can thrive. It's important that you are intentional. You know, there's a saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. There was a British comedian, Spike Milligan, who said, "We don't have a plan, so nothing can go wrong." And it's humorous, but it's true. While you take the time to reflect and reposition and really realign with your values and your skills and really spend time in God's presence to understand where he wants you to be, how he wants you to move forward, be intentional as you move forward. And I wanted to leave these 2 slides from, again, I mentioned Susan David. It's really important to treat yourself with compassion, because you lose so much time and energy when you beat yourself up, when you rehearse the failures of the past. Forgetting those things which are behind, we press forward to the mark of the prize of the high calling in Jesus Christ. And I believe that when we treat ourselves with the compassion that God treats us with, we're able to put ourselves in a place where we can be open and receptive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. So, Susan David shares some tools, but I would say even focus on the spiritual lessons. Think on those things that are lovely and true. Be kind to yourself. Keep your eyes on yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. And lastly, own your truth. Own the truth of your reality. This is what it is. This is not what it is. And that will enable you to really take a good assessment of where you are and how to move forward. And then lastly, she leaves a couple of points, which I realize may be a tad difficult to read on the slide, but you will have these slides posted so you can look at them at your leisure. But some of the things she talks about is having courage and compassion. Again, face your difficult emotions, but realize that your emotions are not who you are. They're just feelings, and feelings are not who you are. Shift your perspective and let go of feeling that you need to be right about things. There are things that are bigger than you and I, and sometimes it's good to just let go and let God and realize that this is what you can control and this is what you can't control. Identify your values and your why, and then not just identify those values and your why or your skills or your gifts, but live in those, walk in those in full confidence of who God has created you to be. And then grow. And one of the things I will say is, as you grow, make sure that you are planted in a place that will nurture you and allow you to bloom. One of the things that we are guilty of is that we stay too long in jobs, relationships, places that do not feed us. And I like to use the analogy of a potted plant. You buy that plant and it will only live for so long and grow only so high in that pot. After a while, the roots start to hit out against that pot, and you have to transplant it into a larger area so that it can move out and grow. Know when it's time to move on so that you can grow. And then lastly, if there's anything that you can take away from my life story and what I shared and what we've talked about today, is be open to change. The fact that you are on this call today, you have made it out of 2020, and we are living and thriving in 2021. But you can limp along, or you can thrive and move forward with agility. And so my closing thoughts are to you is be open to change and realize that what the enemy may have meant for evil, God can work all things together for your good and take those very things that may have seemed like a negative thing in your life and flip them and actually turn them. If you're willing to choose to look at them through different lenses, he can take them and use them as opportunities. So that's where we've come to the end of our talk today, of what I would like to share with you. I hope it's been a blessing. And I'd like to pivot now to questions and discussion, if anyone has any questions.
There were no questions in the chat box at all.
Okay, well, I think there is something else that if I have just 2 minutes, I'd like to share something that I didn't cover, and that's on a practical tip if you are looking for new work. I know I didn't touch on this very much in our time together. People have asked me, Fiona, how did you move from this industry to this industry, and how did you build your career when you left England? So when I left England 10 years ago, I was working in the rail industry in a very, I would say, very bespoke or niche role. I was working as a contract/compliance manager for the rail industry, and my client was the UK government. When I came to the States, I thought I would never find a job, but God knew otherwise. And one of the things that I did was I looked at my resume, and I identified those skills that I had. And then I went on job sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster.com, and Career Builder. And I started just looking at what were hot jobs and finding those jobs that resonated with me. And then I would begin to pull out, what are they asking for? What are the skills that they're asking for? And then I would map those skills against what I thought were transferable skills. Different names maybe, but I could see how my contract management skills or my stakeholder management skills were relevant to what they were asking for. So that's what I did first. And then what I did was I changed my resume from being a chronological resume, you know, this year I did this, that year I did that, and I changed it to a skills-based resume. What do I mean by that? I picked out those key skills, and then I put those in paragraphs, and then I use examples from my different roles as to how I could evidence that I had those skills. And every job I applied to, I tweaked my resume so that that resume was just for that job. And I made sure it fit what they were asking for. And of course, I'd write a cover letter. And then once I'd had that resume, and I posted it on every site that I could. The other trick that I learned, and this is my last point, the other trick I learned was look at what they're asking for in the job. There are some very key words that happen usually at the top of the job posting. And what I learned to do was make sure that those keywords were reflected in my resume at the very top of my opening statement. So if a company is using a search engine, what we call an ATS, applicant tracking system, and they sometimes go into a Monster.com or a Indeed, and they search for applicants who fit these criteria, your resume comes up because you have picked words that align with the kind of job that you're trying to find. And so when you do that, it allows them to pull you into that kind of net of possible applicants. And so that helps to raise your visibility. That's the tip I wanted to share in case anyone is really looking for a job and struggling to find a way to pivot from what they used to do into something new.
Thank you so much, Fiona. I think we have been truly blessed by your presentation. And I think what I would take away from this is that to foster courage and compassion, face your difficult emotions. Thank you so much for that.